the thunder rolled across the Montana sky like angry drums. Lee Sora pulled her jacket tighter as she checked the barn doors one last time. The weather report had warned about severe storms, but nothing prepared her for this fury. Rain hammered against the old ranch house windows, while lightning split the darkness every few seconds. Sora lived alone on the cattle ranch her grandfather had built 50 years ago. The 200 acres stretched from the main road to the forest line where the mountains began. She preferred the quiet life. After losing her parents in the Centauri mining conflicts when she was 20, the ranch became her sanctuary. Now, at 28, she knew every fence post and every cow by name. The storm had been raging for 3 hours when she heard it. A sound different from thunder, a deep roaring that seemed to shake the earth itself. Sora pressed her face against the kitchen window but saw only sheets of rain and flashing lightning. Then came the crash. The impact was tremendous. The ground shook so hard that dishes fell from her shelves. Her cattle were bellowing in terror from the south pasture. Whatever had happened was big, and it was on her land. Sora grabbed her heavy flashlight and raincoat. She should wait until morning. She should call the authorities. But something deep inside told her to go now. Maybe it was a plane crash. Someone might need help. The wind tried to push her back as she fought her way toward the north pasture. Rain stung her face like tiny needles. Her boots sank deep into the muddy ground with every step. The flashlight beam danced wildly in the storm, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. It took her 20 minutes to reach the crash site. What she found there made her stop and stare in complete shock. It was not a plane, a metal pod. About the size of a small car sat buried halfway into the hillside. The craft was unlike anything Sora had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and dark, with strange symbols glowing faintly blue along its sides. Steam rose from the metal despite the cold rain. The front section was cracked open like a broken egg. Sora approached carefully. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it over the storm. This was clearly not human technology. The government would want to know about this immediately. They would take the craft and ask questions later. But then, she heard the sound. A low moan came from inside the pod. Something was alive in there. Sora aimed her flashlight through the crack in the hull. Inside, she saw what looked like a person, but definitely not human. The being was much larger than any man she had ever seen. Its skin had a blue metallic shine that reflected her light. Blood that looked purple in the flashlight beam covered its chest and arms. The creature was clearly dying. Sora stood in the rain for a long moment, thinking. If she called for help, the military would come. They would. Take this being away for experiments and questions. She had seen enough government operations during the war to know how they treated anything they considered a threat. But this creature was hurt and alone. It had crashed on her land during the worst storm in years. Whether it was human or not, it needed help, and she was the only one who could give it. Sora made her decision. Getting the unconscious being out of the pod was the hardest thing she had ever done. Even hurt and limp, it was incredibly heavy. The creature was at least 7 feet tall with broad shoulders and long limbs. Its face was angular, but definitely intelligent. Not human, but not animal either. She managed to drag it onto her old farm sled that she used for moving hay bales. The trip back to the ranch house took 40 minutes. By the time she got the being onto her couch, both of them were soaked through. In the bright lights of her living room, Sora could see her unexpected guest clearly. It was definitely male and definitely not from Earth. His skin was a deep blue color with a metallic sheen like polished steel. His hair was white and longer than human hair should be. His features were sharp and elegant but alien. The wounds were serious. Deep cuts across his chest and arms bled that strange purple blood. His left shoulder looked dislocated. His breathing was shallow and quick. Sora had basic medical training from her time helping with the ranch animals. She had sewn up plenty of cuts on cattle and horses. This could not be much different. She gathered her veterinary supplies and got to work. The purple blood stopped flowing when she cleaned the wounds. His skin seemed to heal faster than human skin would. Within an hour of cleaning and bandaging, the worst cuts had already begun to close. The shoulder was trickier. Sora had to use all her strength to pop it back into place. The alien groaned but did not wake up. She made a sling from an old bedsheet and tried to make him as comfortable as possible. By morning, the storm had passed. Sora sat in her kitchen, drinking coffee and staring at the unconscious alien on her couch. What had she gotten herself into? In a few hours, government drones would probably be searching for the crash site. She needed to hide all evidence that anything had happened. Sora spent the morning covering the pod with branches and dirt. She cleaned up the trail from the crash site to her house. She moved her guest to the spare bedroom where no one could see him from outside. Now all she could do was wait and see if he would live or die. Either way, her quiet life as a rancher was about to become very complicated. The alien slept for 18 hours straight. Sora checked on him every few hours, making sure he was still breathing. His wounds continued to heal at an amazing speed. By evening, his breathing had become deeper and more steady. As the sun set on her ranch, Sora realized she had made a choice that would change everything. She had chosen compassion over caution. She had chosen to help rather than to call for others. To handle the problem, she just hoped it was the right choice. Kale woke up confused and in pain. The first thing he noticed was the smell. It was not the sterile metal scent of his ship or the recycled air of military facilities. This place smelled of wood and earth and something sweet he could not identify. His training kicked in immediately. Unknown location. Possible capture. He tried to sit up fast, but his body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached and his shoulder felt like it was on fire. Where was his weapon? Where was his unit? Then he saw her. A small human female sat in a chair beside the bed watching him with dark eyes. She had black hair pulled back and wore simple clothes that looked handmade. When she saw him wake up, she smiled and said something. In the human language he did not understand. Kale tried to speak, but only a harsh croak came out. His throat was dry as desert sand. The human woman quickly brought him a glass of water. She moved slowly and kept her hands visible like she was dealing with a scared animal. The water was cold and clean, better than anything from his ship recyclers. Kale drank it all and felt some strength return to his body. He looked around the room and saw it was simple but comfortable. Wood walls, a window showing green fields outside, definitely not a military prison. The woman spoke again, pointing to herself. She said one word over and over, Sora, Sora. She was telling him her name. Kale understood. He pointed to himself with one shaking finger. His voice was still rough, but he managed to say his name. Kale. Sora smiled wider and nodded. She said his name back to him, trying to get the pronunciation right. It sounded strange in the human accent, but close enough. Over the next few days, Sora took care of him with amazing patience. She brought him food that was unlike anything he had ever tasted. Fresh vegetables from her garden, meat from animals that grazed in fields instead of being grown in tanks, bread that was soft and warm and made his mouth water. Kyle had never eaten real food before. Military rations were nutrition paste designed for efficiency. This human food had flavors and textures that made eating a pleasure instead of just fuel for the body. His wounds healed faster than Sora expected. Valorian physiology was designed for quick recovery, but he could tell she was amazed by how fast he got stronger. She would check his bandages twice a day and shake her head in wonder. Communication was hard at first. Kyle spoke only military, Valorian and basic trade languages. Sora spoke English and some Korean words her family had taught her. But humans were clever with communication. She used hand signals and simple drawings. She would point at things and say the English word. Kale would repeat it and then teach her the Valorian word. After a week, Kale could walk around the house. Sora showed him how things worked: the kitchen where she cooked amazing meals, the living room with books and pictures of her family, the bathroom with running water that never ran out. Kyle was impressed by human technology, not because it was advanced, but because it was so practical. Everything in Sora's house was built to last. The wood furniture was made by hand to fit the space perfectly. The tools in the kitchen were simple, but worked better than anything on his ship. But what impressed him most was Sora herself. She worked from dawn to dusk, taking care of her cattle and maintaining the ranch. But she never seemed tired or angry about the work. She sang while she cooked. She talked to her animals like they were friends. She treated everything and everyone with gentle care. Valorian society was built on strength and efficiency. Weakness was eliminated. Emotions were controlled. But Sora showed him that strength could be gentle and efficiency could include kindness. When Kale felt strong enough, he started helping with the ranch work. His Valorian strength made heavy lifting easy. Jobs that would take Sora hours he could finish in minutes, but she taught him to be careful with the animals. Cattle and horses scared easily around someone his size. Sora showed him how to move slowly and speak softly, how to read the animals' body language to know when they were calm or nervous, how to work with them instead of just controlling them. It was completely different from military training, but Kale found he liked this kind of work. There was satisfaction in fixing a fence or helping a sick cow get better. The results of the work were visible and helpful instead of destructive. 2 weeks after the crash, government drones started flying over the area. Sora would watch them through the window with worry on her face. She showed Kale pictures on her computer of military vehicles and soldiers. He understood. She was protecting him from her own people. Kyle wanted to know why. In Valorian society, you serve the state above all else. Personal feelings did not matter, but Sora had risked everything to save him. She continued to risk her safety to keep him hidden. When he asked her why, using their mixed language of words and gestures, she looked confused by the question. She pointed to his healing wounds. She mimed him falling and her helping him up. To her, the answer was obvious. He was hurt. She helped. That was what you did. This simple human logic amazed Kyle more than any advanced technology. Sora helped because helping was right, not because she would gain something, not because someone ordered her to, just because it was the right thing to do. As his body healed, Kyle felt something else healing too. The constant tension he had carried as a soldier began to fade. For the first time in his adult life, he felt safe and peaceful. But he knew it could not last forever. Soon his unit would find him. Soon he would have to choose between his duty and this new feeling of home. The nightmares started 3 weeks after the crash. Kyle would fall asleep peacefully, but then the dreams would come. He was back in space, fighting the enemy fleet that had shot him down. His squad was dying around him. He could hear their screams over the communication system, but could not help them. In the dreams, he failed over and over again. He watched his friends die while he lived. He saw their faces asking why he had survived when they had not. The guilt and pain felt as real as when it had actually happened. The first nightmare woke Sora from across the hall. She heard crashing, sounds, and shouting in the alien language. When she ran to check on Kale, she found him thrashing on the bed. His eyes were open, but he was not really awake. His powerful body was fighting enemies that only existed in his mind. Sora tried to wake him up, but it was dangerous to get close. In his nightmare state, Kyle was incredibly strong. He could hurt her without meaning to. She had to stay back and call his name until he finally came out of it. When Kyle fully woke up, he was shaking and covered in sweat. He looked around the destroyed room in shame. He had broken the wooden chair and put holes in the wall with his fists. The gentle human who had saved his life was standing in the doorway looking worried and scared. Kale tried to apologize but did not have enough English. Words. He pointed to himself and shook his head. Bad, wrong, dangerous. Sora should stay away from him. But Sora did not stay away. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed and spoke to him in a soft voice. She did not understand his words, but she understood his pain. She had seen soldiers before. She knew what war could do to a mind. The nightmares came back the next night and the night after that. Each time, Kale would fight invisible enemies and wake up feeling guilty and broken. Each time, Sora would be there to help him remember where he was and that he was safe. After a week of sleepless nights, Sora made a decision. She moved a sleeping mat into Kale's room and slept on the floor beside his bed. When the nightmares started, she could wake him up faster and help him calm down. Something strange happened when Sora slept in the same room. The nightmares were still there, but they were not as violent. Kale's subconscious mind seemed to know she was nearby. Her presence was like an anchor keeping him from drowning completely in the bad dreams. Kale was embarrassed that she had to take care of him like this. In Valorian military culture, showing weakness was shameful. Soldiers were supposed to be strong all the time, but Sora did not treat his nightmares like weakness. She treated them like an injury that needed healing. She started asking him about the dreams using their shared vocabulary. Kale told her about his squad. 5 other Valorian soldiers who had been his family for 10 years. They had trained together, and fought together, and died together. Only he had survived the crash. Sora listened without judgment. She showed him pictures of her parents who had died in the mining conflicts. She understood survivor guilt. She knew the pain of being left behind when people you loved were gone. Slowly, Kyle began to tell her more about his life. Valorian society was built for war. Children were tested at age 5, and the strongest were taken for military training. Kyle had not seen his birth family since then. The military was the only life he had ever known. Sora was shocked by this. Human families stayed together. Children were loved and protected, not turned into weapons. She showed him photos of her childhood on the ranch with her parents and grandfather. Pictures of birthday parties and holidays and lazy summer days. 2. Kale. These pictures were like looking into an alien world. A world where strength was not the only thing that mattered, where people could be valued just for existing, not for what they could do in battle. As they shared stories, their bond grew deeper. Kyle learned that Sora's grandfather had fought in wars too, but had chosen to become a farmer afterward. He had wanted to grow things instead of destroying them. That was why he had started the ranch. Sora learned that Kyle had originally been sent to scout human agricultural methods. The Valorian Empire was having food problems. They're military-focused. Society had never developed good farming techniques. They needed to learn from humans how to grow enough food for everyone. This gave them something to work on together. During the day, Kale helped with ranch work, and Sora taught him about farming. She showed him how to plant seeds and care for growing plants, how to read soil conditions and weather patterns, how to work with nature instead of trying to control it. Kale was amazed by human farming knowledge. With simple tools and careful observation, Sora could grow more food per acre than Valorian technology farms. Her methods were sustainable and produced better tasting crops. At night, they would sit together, and Sora would teach him more English while he taught her basic Valorian. They would share meals and talk about their different worlds. Slowly, the nightmares became less frequent, but Kale still refused to sleep alone. Even when the bad dreams stopped coming every night, he wanted Sora nearby. Her presence had become necessary for his peace of mind. She was his anchor to sanity in a world that had turned upside down. Sora did not mind. She had been alone on the ranch for years after her parents died. Having someone to talk to and care for filled an empty space in her own heart. They were healing each other in ways they did not fully understand. 1 month after the crash, they were sleeping peacefully, in the same room when the scanners finally found them. The Valorian ships appeared in the morning sky like dark birds of prey. Sora was feeding the chickens when she saw them descending toward her ranch. 3 sleek craft that moved without sound and landed in her front yard without disturbing the grass. Cal was repairing a fence when he felt the familiar vibration in his bones. Valorian engines had a specific frequency that all soldiers learned to recognize. His stomach dropped as he realized his time of peace was over. He ran toward the house, but the soldiers were already out of their ships. 5 Valorians in full combat. Armor surrounded the ranch buildings. Their leader was someone Cale knew well. Commander Vel Corthan had trained him personally years ago. Corthan removed his helmet and looked at Cale with cold disapproval. The commander was an old warrior with scars covering his blue face. He had never shown mercy to anyone, including his own soldiers. "You are alive," the commander said in the Valorian language. "We tracked your biosignature after the signal returned. You have been missing for 35 standard days." Cale stood straight and tried to look like the soldier he used to be, but after a month of peace with Sora, he felt different. The constant tension and readiness for battle were gone from his body. He felt relaxed and human-like. "I was injured in the crash," Kyle replied. "I required time to heal." Corthan looked around, the ranch with disgust. "You have been hiding among primitives instead of finding a way to contact us. This is desertion. You know the penalty." The penalty for desertion in the Valorian military was death. But Cale found he did not care about that as much as he should. His month with Sora had shown him there were things more important than military law. Sora came around the corner of the house and stopped when she saw the armed aliens in her yard. She did not understand their language, but she could tell this was trouble. The newcomers had the same hard look as the government soldiers she remembered from the war years. "What is this creature?" Corthan asked, looking at Sora with the same expression he might use for an insect. "She is the one who saved my life," Cale said. "Her name is Sora, and she is under my protection." Corthan laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You speak of protecting a primitive when you have abandoned your duty to the Empire. Gather your equipment. We leave immediately." Kyle did not move. "I am not ready to leave." The other Valorian soldiers tensed. No one ever refused a direct order from Commander Corthan. Cale could see they were reaching for their weapons. "You will come now, or you will be taken by force," Corthan said. "Either way you will answer for your desertion before the military council." "No," Cale said quietly. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Sora did not understand Valorian, but she could tell something important was happening. She moved closer to Cale's side. "Explain yourself, soldier," Corthan demanded. Cale looked at Sora and then back at his commander. "This human found me dying and brought me to health. She asked for nothing in return. She protected me from her own people who would have used me for experiments. She is my sanctuary keeper." The Valorian soldiers looked confused. Sanctuary keeper was an ancient concept from their homeworld. In the old days, before the military empire, warriors who were broken by battle could claim sanctuary with someone who would guard their healing. But that was thousands of years ago. Sanctuary keepers have not existed since the empire began, Corthan said. "You speak of legends." "Then I am creating new legend," Cale replied. "This human has shown me what life can be beyond war. I will not abandon her." Sora saw the tension building in the alien soldiers. She could not understand their words, but their body language was clear. They wanted to take Cale away, and he was refusing to go. Without thinking, she stepped between Cale and the commander. She was much smaller than any of the Valorians, but she stood as tall as she could and looked Corthan directly in his scarred face. "No," she said in English. Then she switched to the few Valorian words Kyle had taught her. "Kyle, stay, my friend." Corthan. stared down at the small human female who dared to defy him. In his long military career, no one had ever shown such disrespect. Certainly not a primitive creature from a backward planet. "Remove this obstacle," he ordered his soldiers. As the Valorians moved forward, Sora ran into her house. Kale started to follow her, but she came back out carrying her grandfather's old shotgun. She had never used it on anything bigger than wolves, but she held it steady and aimed it at the commander's chest. "I said no," she repeated. Her voice was calm, but her hands did not shake. "Kyle stays because he wants to stay. You will have to kill me first." The Valorian soldiers stopped moving. They had faced enemy armies and space pirates and alien monsters, but none of them had ever seen anything like this tiny human female standing up to their most feared commander with nothing but courage and an ancient weapon. "She cannot harm us," one of the soldiers said. "Her primitive gun would not even dent our armor." But Corthan held up his hand. He was looking at Sora with new interest. Not many beings in the galaxy had the courage to face certain death without backing down. He had seen veteran soldiers break under less pressure. "You would die for this deserter?" he asked Sora. Sora looked at Kale, who was translating the commander's words. She nodded firmly and spoke in English, knowing Kale would translate. "She says yes," Kale told his commander. "She says, I am not a deserter. I am a person choosing to live in peace instead of war. She says that is not wrong." Corthan studied the human woman for a long moment. Then he looked at Kale, who had changed from the cold soldier he once knew into someone who could smile and laugh and care about another being's welfare. "There is an old law," the commander said slowly. "If a warrior claims sanctuary keeper bond, it can be tested. If the bond proves true, the military must honor it. But the tests are difficult, and failure means death for both participants." Sora did not understand the words, but she saw hope in Kale's eyes. Whatever the commander was offering, it was better than immediate capture. "What must we do?" Kale asked. "3 trials," Corthan replied. "Understanding, trust, sacrifice. If your human can prove her bond with you through all 3 tests, I will release you from service. If she fails, you both die." Kale translated for Sora. She listened carefully, then looked at the armed soldiers surrounding her home. She looked at Kale, who had become the most important person in her world. Then she looked back at the commander and nodded. "We accept," she said. Commander Corthan explained the trials to both Kyle and Sora. The tests were ancient and had not been used for thousands of years. But military law was military law. If Sora could prove her sanctuary keeper bond was real, then Kyle would be free to stay with her. The first test would begin immediately. Understanding meant Sora had to show she truly knew Kale as a person. Not just as a patient she had nursed back to health, but as a complete being with a history and personality and inner pain. Corthan would ask questions about Kyle that only someone with deep understanding could answer. If Sora failed even one question, the test would end, and they would both be executed. The commander began with simple facts. What was Kale's military unit number? What planet was he born on? What was his rank and specialization? Sora answered easily. During their long talks, Kale had shared basic information about his life. Then the questions became harder. What was the name of Kale's squad leader who died in the battle? What fear did Kale have as a child that still affected him today? What was the real reason he had refused to return with his unit? Sora closed her eyes and thought carefully before each answer. She remembered the nightmares and the stories Kale had shared during their quiet conversations. She remembered small details he had mentioned while they worked together on the ranch. His squad leader was Nar Vithan. She was like a sister to him, and he still dreamed about failing to save her. As a child, Kale was afraid of small dark spaces because military training involved being locked in boxes for discipline. The real reason he refused to return was not because he loved Sora romantically, but because she had shown him what life without constant violence could be like. Corthan looked surprised that Sora knew such personal information. Most Valorian soldiers never shared their inner thoughts with anyone. But Kale had opened his heart to this human in ways he had never done with his own people. The first test was passed. The second test required trust. Sora would be put in a dangerous situation where only Kale's guidance could save her life. She would have to follow his instructions exactly without understanding why he was telling her to do certain things. The Valorian soldiers set up a combat, training scenario in Sora's barn. They used energy fields to create a maze filled with simulated dangers, laser barriers that could burn her, gravity fields that could crush her, moving walls that could trap her forever. Sora would have to navigate through the maze wearing a blindfold. Kale would guide her using only his voice over a communication device. One wrong step would mean death or serious injury. The Valorians explained the rules but did not tell Sora what specific dangers she would face. She had to trust completely in Kale's ability to see the maze and guide her safely through it. Sora put on the blindfold and communication earpiece. The world went dark. She could hear Kyle's voice clearly, but could not see anything around her. "Take 3 steps forward, then stop," Kyle said. His voice was calm and sure. Sora walked forward, counting her steps. She stopped exactly where he told her to stop. "There is a laser barrier 18 inches in front of your face," Kale explained. "Turn left and take 2 small steps." Sora could not see the barrier, but she felt heat on her skin. She turned left and stepped carefully. The heat faded. For 20 minutes, Kyle guided her through the deadly maze. Sometimes he had to tell her to duck under invisible obstacles. Sometimes she had to jump over energy fields. Sometimes she had to wait while moving walls shifted position. Sora never questioned his instructions. When he told her to drop flat, she dropped immediately. When he told her to run, she ran without hesitation. She trusted him completely with her life. The other Valorian soldiers watched in amazement. The maze was designed to challenge trained warriors. Most soldiers failed it multiple times before learning the correct path. But Sora navigated it perfectly on her first try because her trust in Kale was absolute. When she reached the end of the maze and removed her blindfold, Sora was shaking from fear and adrenaline. But she was alive and unharmed. The second test was passed. The third test was the hardest. Sacrifice meant Sora would have to choose between something she valued deeply and Kale's freedom. The choice had to be meaningful and permanent. She could not simply give up something small. Commander Corthan studied Sora's ranch and made his decision. The test would require her to give up the ranch itself, the land her grandfather had built, the home where she had lived her entire life, the cattle and crops and buildings that represented everything she was. If she would sell the ranch and give the money to the Valorian Empire as payment for Kale's release, then the bond would be proven. But she would lose everything she had worked for. She would be homeless and penniless, with nowhere to go. Sora listened to the terms of the test through Kyle's translation. Her face went pale as she understood what was being asked of her. The ranch was not just property. It was her identity, her connection to her family, her entire reason for living. But when she looked at Kale, she saw something even more important. Here was someone who had found peace because of her kindness. Someone who had learned to smile and laugh and hope for the future. Someone who needed her as much as she needed him. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. 1 hour, Corthan replied. Sora walked through her ranch for what might be the last time. She touched the fence posts her grandfather had set by hand. She visited the grave where her parents were buried. She looked at the cattle that depended on her for care. Everything she was came from this land, but everything she had become was connected to Kale. The scared soldier who had crashed during a storm had become her best friend and the person she cared about most in the world. When the hour was up, Sora returned to where the Valorians were waiting. She had made her decision. She would sacrifice the ranch to save Kale. But before she could speak, Kale stepped forward and held up his hand. "I refuse to allow the third test," he announced. The Valorian soldiers looked shocked. No one had ever refused a Sanctuary Keeper trial before. "Her willingness to make the sacrifice is proof enough," Kale continued. "She was ready to give up everything for my freedom. The bond is proven. I will not let her actually lose her home when she has already shown her love is real." Commander Corthan stared at both of them for a long moment. Then slowly he began to smile. It was the first time any of his soldiers had ever seen him look pleased about anything. "Perhaps," the commander said, "there is wisdom in these old laws after all." Commander Corthan looked at Kale with something that might have been respect. In 40 years of military service, he had never seen a soldier put another being's welfare above his own interests. But Kale had been willing to stop the trial, even though it might cost him his freedom. "The bond is proven beyond question," Corthan announced. "Any being willing to sacrifice everything for another, and any being willing to prevent that sacrifice, shows true partnership. I release Scout Kale from active military duty." The other Valorian soldiers looked surprised. They had expected their commander to find some way to take Kale back regardless of the trial results. But the old warrior had been moved by what he had witnessed. "However," Corthan continued, "there are conditions. Kale, you were sent to study human agricultural methods. That mission is not complete. You will remain here not as a deserter, but as a permanent agricultural attaché to the Empire." Kyle and Sora looked at each other with growing hope. This was better than they had dared to dream. "The Empire faces food shortages," Corthan explained to Sora. "Our military society never developed efficient farming techniques. We need to learn from human agricultural wisdom. Your ranch will become the first human Valorian agricultural exchange center." Sora felt excitement building in her chest. Instead of losing her ranch, she would be expanding it. Instead of working alone, she would have help and resources to grow more food than ever before. "Other human farmers will come to learn Valorian technology," Corthan continued. "Other Valorian scouts will come to learn human farming methods. You and Kale will manage this exchange and prove that cooperation between our species is possible." The commander turned to his soldiers. "Begin preparing the agricultural support equipment. We will establish a permanent outpost here within the month." The Valorians returned to their ships to make arrangements. Kyle and Sora walked through the ranch together. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. They were no longer hiding from the world. They were about to become partners in building something new and important. That night, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset over the mountains. For the first time since Kale had crashed, they could make plans for the future without fear. "What will it be like?" Sora asked, "having other people here all the time?" "Different," Kale replied, "but good different. You will teach humans and Valorians alike. Your grandfather would be proud that his ranch became a place of learning instead of just farming." Sora smiled. She had been alone for so long that the idea of a busy ranch filled with students and teachers seemed like a wonderful dream. "Will you miss being a soldier?" she asked. Kale considered the question carefully. He had been trained for war since childhood. Fighting was all he had ever known. But the past month had shown him there were other ways to be strong. "No," he said finally. "Being a soldier meant destroying things. This will let me help build things instead. I like building better than destroying." 3 months later, the ranch was bustling with activity. Human farmers from across the continent came to learn about Valorian growing techniques. The aliens had developed ways to improve soil quality and control weather that could increase crop yields dramatically. Valorian agricultural students came to study human sustainable farming methods. They were amazed by crop rotation and companion planting and natural pest control. Many had never seen food growing in real soil instead of laboratory tanks. Sora found she loved teaching. She had always been quiet and shy, but sharing her knowledge felt natural and important. The human students respected her expertise. The Valorian students were fascinated by her gentle methods. Kyle became her partner in every sense. He translated when language barriers caused problems. His strength was useful for heavy construction work as they expanded the ranch buildings. His military organizational skills helped manage the complex schedules of students and teachers, but most importantly, he continued to provide the emotional support they both needed. The nightmares never completely went away, but they came less often. When they did, Sora was always there to help him through them. At night, after the students had gone to their dormitories, Kale and Sora would sit together planning the next day's lessons. They had developed their own mixed language of English, and Valorian and hand signals. They understood each other perfectly without needing many words. The ranch had become famous throughout both human and Valorian space. Diplomats came to study their cooperation model. Scientists came to research their agricultural innovations. But Kale and Sora remained focused on the simple work of growing food and teaching others. One evening, as they walked through fields that now grew both earth crops and Valorian food plants, Sora asked a question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Do you ever regret staying here instead of returning to your people?" Kale looked at the sunset painting the sky in brilliant colors. He looked at the healthy plants growing in neat rows. He looked at Sora, whose presence had become as necessary to him as breathing. "This is my people now," he said. "You are my people. This ranch is my home. I have never been happier in my life." 6 months after the crash that had brought them together, Kale and Sora hosted a celebration. The first joint human-Valorian harvest festival brought together farmers and soldiers and students from both species. Commander Corthan attended the festival and was amazed by what he saw. Humans and Valorians working together, sharing food and stories and laughter, building friendships across species lines that had seemed impossible. "You have done something remarkable here," he told Sora and Kyle. "You have proven that cooperation is stronger than conquest. The Empire will remember this lesson." As the celebration continued into the night, Kale and Sora slipped away from the crowd. They walked to the place where his pod had crashed during that terrible storm. The area was now a peaceful garden where both human and Valorian memorial plants grew together. "Thank you," Kale said quietly. "For what?" Sora asked. "For seeing me as a person instead of an enemy. For choosing to help instead of being afraid. For showing me what peace feels like." Sora took his hand. It was large and strong, and still had the blue metallic color that marked him as alien. But it was warm and gentle, and belonged to the person she cared about most in the universe. "Thank you for staying," she replied. "Thank you for choosing love over duty. Thank you for helping me build something beautiful." They stood together in the garden where their story had begun. Around them, the ranch hummed with new life and purpose. Above them, stars from both their homeworlds shone down with gentle light. Tomorrow would bring new students and new challenges. But tonight, they had each other and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. It was more than enough.